Chapter 561 The battle intensifies. Caspian willingly made a risky move. He's not known as the Diatoranian God of War for nothing, after all. Nevertheless, the Diatoranians barely have any troops left in the West Eredland's war zone, and the King of Diatoran is there as well, Ernest remarked. If we deploy our troops to West Fortress Gorge, we can use the gorge to invade the West Eredland's war zone and capture the king. The Deputy General immediately exclaimed, "Sir, we'll definitely be able to defeat Caspian and seize West Eredland's this time. If we can capture the King of Diatoran, we can even conquer the entire Diatoran," Ernest added in excitement. Thus, without even a moment of hesitation, Ernest deployed over 60,000 soldiers to besiege West Fortress Gorge. Meanwhile, he led the remaining 20,000 soldiers over to Cassius to provide reinforcements for the troops there. Over at the border of West Eredland's, Cassius's troops had been forced to scatter after being targeted by heavy gunfire. They could no longer fight back. This was the moment Caspian had been waiting for. After telling the jets to stand down, he had Dax's and Toby's troops launch an assault on enemy forces. Meanwhile, Caspian and his regiment also charged into battle. The soldiers of Diatoran rushed forward with great fervor. Meanwhile, Filrenian soldiers had dodged into the trenches to evade the attacks. When they heard the thundering battle cries, they trembled in fear. The earlier attack had decimated half of their forces, and by the time they came back to their senses, the Diatoranian army was charging at them from 3 directions. The Filrenian soldiers immediately jumped out of the trenches to fight back. Gunshots filled the air as Diatoranian soldiers raised their machine guns and fired at the enemy. The soldiers of Filren, who had just scrambled out of the trenches, immediately collapsed to the ground without even getting the chance to defend themselves. Caspian and his troops started an intense battle against the Filrenian army. As the Diatoranian God of War, Caspian didn't charge into enemy territory. He hung back slightly to oversee the battle, and Macy stuck close to him at all times, to protect him. Ambushed from 3 sides, the soldiers of Filren were in a perilous situation. Cassius, who was hiding underground, was terrified by the roars and howls he heard from the battlefield. "Come, let's head up and see what the situation's like," Cassius instructed. With his deputy general protecting him, Cassius rushed out onto the battlefield. As soon as he emerged from his dugout, he saw the Diatoranian army rapidly approaching. Filren's forces were being forced to retreat as they couldn't put up a fight. "Hold your ground! Don't you dare retreat!" Cassius bellowed. However, the Filrenian soldiers could only think of one thing: to flee for their lives. "I'll kill any soldier who runs from the fight," Cassius roared. If this situation continued, Filren would soon be defeated. Thus, he took his gun and fired at the retreating soldiers. After a series of rapid gunfire, all of the retreating soldiers were shot down. Yet, despite Cassius' brutal decision, the soldiers continued to flee. They were far too consumed by terror to care. Meanwhile, Dax was charging over with his soldiers, and Filren's troops were caught off guard. Dax swiftly started firing at the fleeing enemy, and soon, the panicked Filrenian soldiers fell to the ground, howling in pain. "Kill them all!" Dax shouted, as he led his soldiers into combat. When Cassius saw that he was surrounded, he grew frantic. "Why aren't our jets here yet? Get in touch with the command center. Tell them we need reinforcements," Cassius commanded. "Yes, sir," his deputy general replied before heading to their command post to call the Filren's command center. The structure was on the verge of collapse, but thankfully, the equipment was still functioning well. "Command center, requesting acknowledgement. Over," the deputy general called out repeatedly. Soon, he received a response from the command center. "We hear you. What's the report?" "General Latham wants to know when the jets will arrive. We're under attack from Caspian Lynch and his troops," the deputy general said urgently. "The jets are on their way. It should only take them about 15 more minutes. Do your best to hold on," the personnel at the command center replied. "Got it. Let's hope the jets will put these Diatoranian punks in their places," the deputy general declared. "Since the armies have clashed, there's a high chance of risking friendly fire if the jets bombard the battlefield," the personnel from the command center warned. "Focus fire on the edge of the battlefield. That's where Caspian and his soldiers are," the deputy general replied. "Understood." The deputy general returned to Cassius and reported, "Sir, our jets will be arriving in 15 minutes, so we must hold on until then." "Good," Cassius said as he looked up at the sky. The Diatoranian jets had retreated. "As long as we stand our ground until the jets arrive, we will definitely defeat Caspian." Cassius declared with full confidence. That's right. We're only in this predicament now because we were forced to hide from their jets. Things wouldn't have turned out like this if we had the jets as reinforcements from the start, the Deputy General said. Arrange the battle formation. Make sure we stand our ground until the jets arrive, Cassius instructed. Yes, sir. Now that Cassius knew that Filrenian's jets would soon be coming, he was looking forward to the upcoming fight. Observing the battle from a distance, Caspian grinned when he saw that the Diatoranian army had gained the upper hand. Filrenian might deploy their jets too. Tell our jets to intercept them, Caspian instructed. Once he gave the order, over 100 jets rose back into the sky and flew toward Filrenian. The jets had not retreated after all. They simply touched down on the side to await further orders. As the border of West Eredlands was fairly near Filrenian, they would be able to reach the center of Filrenian in just over 10 minutes. Cassius tried his best to move his soldiers around, but he couldn't find a suitable opening as they were surrounded. Since there was no chance for them to break out of the siege, all he could do now was hope that the Filrenian jets would arrive as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, Diatoran's air force had already left Diatoran and was heading into Filrenian's airspace. A few minutes later, Filrenian's jets lifted off, and as soon as both nations' jets met in the sky, they instantly engaged in a ferocious battle. The squadron of jets that was supposed to reinforce Cassius's troops had no choice but to join in the fight. But alas, they were outnumbered by the Diatoranian Air Force, who had come prepared and managed to start the fight at a great advantage. Some of the Filrenian jets were shot down before they could even fire at the enemy. The remaining ones started to retreat in fear. Caspian had ordered the Air Force to merely force the enemy into retreat. They were not to hunt the enemy down, lest they got themselves in sticky situations. Thus, the Diatoranian jets simply hovered at the border, ready to attack any enemy jets that appeared. Chapter 562, The Filrenian Army Surrenders. Despite both parties still clashing fiercely, Cassius and his soldiers were completely surrounded. After sustaining heavy casualties, the Filrenian army gradually lost the ability to hold their ground. Over 10 minutes had passed, and there was still no sign of the Filrenian jets. Cassius was extremely agitated. "Where's the squadron?" Cassius asked. "I don't know, sir. They said the squadron would be arriving in 15 minutes. But more than 15 minutes have passed since then," the Deputy General replied. "Call up the command center and find out what's going on," Cassius instructed. "Yes, sir." The Deputy General immediately did as told. Command center. Requesting acknowledgement. Over. The Deputy General made an urgent call to the Filrenian Army's command center. "We hear you." "Go on," the personnel at the command center replied. "It has been nearly 20 minutes. Why aren't the jets here yet?" the Deputy General asked. "The squadron was attacked by the Diatoranian Air Force and can no longer head over there," the personnel said. "What are we supposed to do then? We're surrounded by the enemy. This is a critical situation. We won't be able to hold our ground if this continues," the Deputy General reported in a panic. "We are already discussing a counter. General Maher and his troops will be arriving soon to help you." "I'm afraid we'll be wiped out before General Maher gets here," the Deputy General said urgently. "You must hold on no matter what." "That's the only way to secure victory," the personnel declared. "Understood," the Deputy General replied. He immediately gave Cassius an update on the situation, but the latter's expression darkened at the news. "The Air Force can't help us, and the ground reinforcements aren't here yet. There's no way we can hold our ground," Cassius said in vexation. "Sir, why don't we wait until the Diatoranian forces close in on us before charging our way through?" the Deputy General suggested. "How are we going to break through their ranks?" "We're surrounded," Cassius retorted. "Well, we can't just stand by and do nothing. We'll be killed," one of the staff officers said. He knew how difficult the situation was for them right now. But they had to do something. "Instead of letting them capture us, it's better for us to die in service to our nation," Cassius declared as he pointed his gun at his head. The Deputy General and all the other staff officers immediately rushed over to stop him. "You can't do that, sir," one of them cried out. "There has got to be a way, sir. We can't give up just like that," the Deputy General said. "The enemy is approaching from all fronts. There's no way we can get past them," Cassius said defeatedly. "We can surrender. At the very least, we won't have to die," the Deputy General suggested. "Are you kidding me? I'm Cassius Latham, a general of Filrenian. I will never surrender," Cassius roared in fury. "All of our comrades will die if we stubbornly choose to resist. You're our general. It's your duty to ensure our survival, too. We have no other choice now, the deputy general advised. Cassius thought he had a point. There's no time, sir. Once the Diatoranian army closes in, we won't even have the chance to surrender, the deputy general continued. Looking out at the battlefield, Cassius saw his soldiers fleeing and getting shot down. Feeling helpless, he said, "Fine, we'll surrender." Once Cassius nodded in agreement, the deputy general shouted to the soldiers, "We surrender. Wave the white flag." The deputy general was the first to wave a white flag in the air. "Stop! We surrender! Stop! Cease fire! We're surrendering! Cease fire! We surrender!" Over and over again, the deputy general shouted as he waved the white flag as hard as he could. When the Filrenian soldiers saw the deputy general surrendering, they cast aside their weapons and stopped fighting. "Lord Caspian, the Filrenian army has surrendered," Macy cried out excitedly when she saw the white flag being raised. "Tell the soldiers to cease fire," Caspian instructed. Since the Filrenian army had surrendered, he called for a ceasefire as well. It would be too inhumane of him to continue with the slaughter. Otherwise, who knew what the enemy would do when they were backed into a corner? They might choose to fight to the bitter end instead, leading to more bloodshed than necessary. Caspian chose to let the Filrenian army surrender. By disarming them first, it would be easier for the Diatoranian army to deal with Filren's reinforcements when the latter arrived. He made this decision after taking into account all possibilities. Accept their surrender and confiscate their weapons. Do not fire at them. Caspian's order was passed down to the soldiers. They immediately surrounded the Filrenian soldiers. There were less than 50,000 of them now. After seizing the Filrenian army's weapons, the Diatoranian soldiers gathered the enemy soldiers and restrained them. "We have disarmed them, Lord Caspian. The base is ours now," Macy reported. "Good. Come with me to the base," Caspian said before marching off. Macy stuck close to him to guard him. Following the devastating battle, the base was littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers, and most of them were Filrenian. Soon, Caspian arrived at the base. Having agreed to the surrender, Cassius looked ashen-faced. Not a single trace of his earlier spirit and determination could be seen in him. Cassius had started with an excellent plan. He thought he and Ernest could join forces to ambush Caspian and defeat him, making a name for themselves. Alas, Caspian was too strong. In just a little over an hour, Caspian had defeated the Filrenian army. Despite numbering over 100,000 in manpower and having a myriad of defensive fortifications, the Filrenian army folded like a deck of cards when confronted by Caspian. "Do you accept your defeat?" Caspian asked as he looked at Cassius. "You're the undefeated god of war whose name commands nothing but awe and respect. It is my honor to have fought against you today." "I willingly accept my defeat," Cassius answered. He genuinely respected Caspian's abilities. During the start of the battle, Caspian and the Diatoranian army had been at a disadvantage. However, Caspian managed to turn things around in just a little over an hour. "You should have stayed within your borders. Your defeat was decided from the moment you people chose to invade our territories. Soon, I'll let you witness how I defeat the Filrenian reinforcements," Caspian proudly declared. No country is allowed to challenge Diatoran's sovereignty, not even if a few countries join forces. Caspian started issuing more orders. He had some soldiers keep an eye on the prisoners of war. Then, he instructed the rest of the soldiers to set up the base and prepare for the clash with the Filrenian reinforcements. Soon, the Filrenians heard about Cassius' surrender. They were thunderstruck. No one expected Caspian to defeat Cassius so quickly. They began to call Cassius a coward. How could he make the humiliating choice of surrender? He still had nearly 50,000 soldiers with him. He should have chosen to fight with all of his might instead, even if it meant dying in battle. Filren's higher-ups were outraged. They thought that Cassius was a humiliation to the country. They immediately got in touch with Ernest and instructed him to head over to the battlefield as quickly as he could. He was to seize the base and defeat Caspian. Chapter 563, Ambushing the Enemy. When Ernest received the order from Filren's army command center, he was informed of Cassius' surrender as well. How pathetic! Cassius had over 100,000 soldiers, but he couldn't even last 4 hours. If he had held on just a little longer, we could have ambushed Caspian, Ernest snapped in agitation. "Sir, Cassius' defeat has thrown a wrench into our plans." "What should we do now?" a deputy general asked. "The command center has given us their order. Caspian has only just claimed that base. We're going to attack him and take it back," Ernest declared. But General Latham couldn't hold out against Caspian's attacks despite having set up a base there. It seems unlikely that we can win against the Diatoranian God of War, the Deputy General cautioned. Silence! Why are you speaking so highly of your enemy? Caspian and his troops had a long journey, and they had been fighting for over 10 hours. I'm sure they're exhausted right now. We can definitely crush them if we attack them now, Ernest declared with conviction. You're right, sir. We should be arriving at Diatoran's border in about 45 minutes. Since Caspian and his troops have just gone through an intense battle, they wouldn't be able to withstand our attacks, the Deputy General replied. That's right. And don't forget, we've sent an ambush team over to West Fortress Gorge. If they take control of the area, we can come at Caspian from Diatoran's side, too, Ernest said with a chuckle. That's brilliant, sir. I'm sure this would catch Caspian off guard, the Deputy General gushed with praise. Tell everyone to move at top speed. We must reach Caspian and his troops and defeat them before they have time to rest, Ernest instructed. Yes, sir. Back at the border of West Eredlands, Macy was reporting to Caspian. The base has been completely destroyed. We can't repair the defensive structures under such short notice. And the enemy's reinforcements should be arriving soon. It's said that Filrenian has sent General Ernest Maher to lead the battle. I got it, Caspian said with a nod. Have you thought of a way to defeat them, Lord Caspian? Macy asked. That's right. Ernest doesn't have a big army with him. We have a high chance of success, Caspian said confidently. What's your plan, Lord Caspian? Macy asked curiously. I'll have 2 military units set up an ambush near the border. We'll surround and slaughter Ernest and his soldiers upon their arrival, Caspian said. I'll make the arrangements right away, Macy said before turning to leave. There's no rush. It'll be a while before they arrive. Work on fixing the defense. Fortifications here first. There's still enough time. We can deploy the soldiers later, Caspian said. Just then, Dax came in to say, You are indeed an incredible strategist, Lord Caspian. Everything is going according to your plan. I am truly in awe of you. You're too kind, Champion Santos. This is the result of everyone's teamwork and efforts. I didn't defeat the enemy alone, Caspian replied with a smile. Be that as it may, Lord Caspian, there's no denying you have achieved a great feat. You cleared all obstacles along the way, and as soon as you arrived in West Eredlands, you turned the tides around for us. You are a far better commander than I am, Dax declared respectfully. Ernest and his troops will be arriving soon. Now's not the time for us to celebrate. We can only relax a little when the entire Filrenian army has been defeated. We can't let our guard down yet, Caspian reminded. You're right, Lord Caspian. What's our next move? Dax asked. The enemy would have known that we deployed troops from West Fortress, so they would undoubtedly besiege it through West Fortress Gorge, Caspian said. Didn't His Majesty redeploy 30,000 soldiers to West Fortress Gorge to defend it? Dax queried. That's right, but 30,000 soldiers won't be enough to resist the Filrenian forces. We will be in a lot of danger if the enemy manages to get past our border, Caspian said. What should we do, then? Dax asked. Toby, Caspian called out. Here, sir, Toby, the West Fortress commander, came forward. Lead your troops back to West Fortress Gorge and defend it. Don't let the enemy get their way. We can't afford any mistakes, Caspian commanded. Yes, sir. The enemy forces are most likely approaching the gorge as we speak. You can strike them from behind. That way, with the help of the soldiers standing guard at West Fortress, you can cage the Filrenians in on both sides and wipe them out, Caspian instructed. Will do, sir. Toby swiftly led his troops back to West Fortress Gorge. Lord Caspian, Ernest Maher and his army will be arriving soon. If you let Toby and his troops leave now, we'll be even less equipped to handle the enemy, Dax said. West Fortress is an extremely crucial location. We must hold on to it at all costs, Caspian replied. Understood, sir, Dax said. Over at the command center in the West Eredlands war zone, Balthazar was thrilled to hear the latest update. He had been informed of Caspian's victory, which led to Cassius's surrender and the base now being under the Diatoranian army's control. Caspian truly is an invincible commander who can overcome all obstacles. With him around, I have nothing to worry about, Balthazar remarked with a laugh. Lord Caspian has overseen over 1,000 battles, Your Majesty, and he hasn't lost a single one yet. You can rest assured with him leading our troops, Lyndon added with a smile. I'm not worried about West Eredlands since Caspian's here, but the situation over at South Eredlands doesn't look too good. East Eredlands is also locked in a fierce battle. There's no way for me to rest easy, Balthazar lamented. Don't worry, Your Majesty. The situation over at East Eredlands is looking positive. As long as the reinforcements arrive, we will surely turn the tides and achieve victory. You need not worry about South Eredlands either. Once Lord Caspian deals with around there too, Lyndon assured. Caspian has fought on the battlefield for so many years, but we still need him to defend the country on all fronts. I feel indebted to him. If only the other war gods were like him, too, Balthazar commented, sighing. Lord Caspian is a rare talent, Your Majesty. He's 1 in a billion, Lyndon said. That's true. Either way, as long as we have Caspian, I don't need to worry about Diatoran, Balthazar stated. In next to no time, all of Diatoran heard about Caspian defeating Cassius, and everyone rejoiced. The outcome of the battle had renewed the hope of the despairing Diatoranians. As the situation at West Eredlands had been reported in full, everyone knew that Caspian had gone off to the west. Not a single soul in Diatoran was unfamiliar with Caspian's name. Meanwhile, the victory at West Eredlands also boosted the morale of the soldiers stationed everywhere else. Over at South Eredlands, Benjamin was also in a spirited mood as he instructed, Lord Caspian has defeated the Filrenian army. Tell everyone that we must defend South Eredlands until he returns. Once he does, we'll be able to emerge victorious. Yes, sir. One of the military officers immediately left to give the order. Chapter 564 The Hope of Diatoran. Despite giving their best, John and the maritime troops had a hard time fending off the enemy and had to retreat to the coastline. Sylvia and Desmond fought valiantly as well. Soldiers, Lord Caspian has defeated the enemy at West Eredlands. He achieved an all-out victory and proved the might of Diatoran. We must stop the enemy from entering South Lake City no matter what happens. We must send them packing, Sylvia hollered. The soldiers at South Lake City roared in fervor. Meanwhile, the battleships along the coastline and the Air Force squadrons also fought with determination. Though the battle was brutal, no one backed down from it. Sylvia and the others had already stationed themselves along the coastline, so the maritime troops of both Vedesia and Astronia couldn't get past them. Both parties fought fiercely along the coastline at South Lake City, and both suffered devastating casualties. Over at East Eredlands, Estria's maritime troops had launched a ferocious attack, and the Diatoranian maritime forces had to retreat. Sir, we can't hold on much longer. What should we do? A deputy general asked Cath, the East Eredlands champion. Our reinforcements will be arriving soon. Tell the soldiers to hold on a little longer. Don't let the enemy break through our front line, Cath instructed. How much longer will it take before our reinforcements arrive? Considering the enemy's aggressive assaults, I'm afraid we can only hang in there for another 40 minutes, the deputy general reported. They should be arriving at the predetermined location in about half an hour. When the time comes, we'll be able to counterattack, and the Estrian forces will be defeated. Victory is the only acceptable outcome. We cannot afford to lose, Cath declared. Understood, sir. When the maritime troops out on the sea received Cath's order, they steeled themselves and risked it all to hold the enemy back. Alas, the Estrian troops were too strong. They were able to make incremental gains, slowly making their way closer to the shore. Cath was even prepared to mount the final defense once the enemy landed on the shore. The soldiers at East Eredlands held out for half an hour, and right when they were about to lose their ground, an aircraft carrier arrived. Along with numerous battleships, the reinforcements from South Eredlands had arrived. Immediately, the jets from the aircraft carrier joined the fight. Estrian's maritime troops had been busy attacking the defense line of the Diatoranian army at East Eredlands. It never occurred to them that Diatoran would deploy an aircraft carrier and several battleships to the area, so they were completely caught off guard and couldn't put up a fight. Our reinforcements have arrived. An East Eredlands commander cried out in excitement when he saw the aircraft carrier and the fighter jets. The soldiers at East Eredlands were also energized by the arrival of the reinforcements. With renewed strength, they attacked the enemy once more. Besieged on two fronts, the Estrian troops had to divide themselves into two to deal with the Diatoranian forces. Naturally, that decision ended up weakening them. They no longer fought as ferociously as they did before. Thus, the Estrian maritime troops began suffering heavy casualties. Willow and Zoe had arrived in Garthram and were staying in a villa. The armored battalion who came with them remained on guard around the villa. Willow, did you see the news? Our army defeated the enemy at West Eredlands, and they even surrendered. Caspian's incredible. He really is the invincible. God of War! Zoe gushed. I never thought Caspian would be so amazing either, Willow exclaimed. She was also thrilled by the news that Caspian had defeated the enemy. It never would have occurred to her that Caspian was such a capable commander. Everyone in Diatoran thinks that Caspian is a hero. You should hurry up and give him a son who can inherit his legacy. Men care a lot about having someone to pass their legacy down to, you know? That's the best way to keep him tied to the family. Tons of women out there are eyeing him right now. Well, let's just wait until he returns safely. Although our army has defeated the enemy at West Eredlands, they won't give up so easily. This was just one battle. We don't know whether Diatoran will emerge victorious in the war yet, Willow said worriedly. Caspian's the god of war, the head of the 5 war gods of Diatoran. I'm sure he'll defeat all our enemies, Zoe declared. I hope so. I hope he comes back victorious. Also, I wonder where my father is right now, Willow said as she abruptly thought about Carl. She didn't care about the rest of the stewards. Carl was the only one she cared about. You can call to check in on him, Zoe suggested. Good idea! Willow nodded and gave Carl a call. Carl and the stewards had just arrived in Garthram. When Carl saw the call from Willow, he immediately answered it. Why are you calling now, Willow? Did something happen? Carl asked. Everything's fine, Dad. I just wanted to know if you've left South Lake City, Willow said. I just arrived in Garthram. What about you? Carl asked. I'm in Garthram too, Willow replied. Since Carl was also in Garthram, she no longer worried about his safety. It's not safe in South Lake City anymore. It's good that you got out of the city. Be safe, Carl said. I will, Dad, Willow answered before ending the call. Once Carl got off the phone, Marilyn asked, Who called you? Was it Willow? Yeah, Willow's here in Garthram too, Carl replied. I see. What about Henry and Alicia? Are they here yet? Marilyn asked. I'll call them up and check on them. Mom, Donald said. Good, do it quickly. I'm very worried about them, Marilyn said. Donald got his phone out and called Henry. At the moment, Henry and the Hudsons were still in South Lake City. Even though they heard the sound of battle, they weren't afraid. On the contrary, they looked forward to the Videsian army successfully taking over the city. Just then, Henry got a call. What is it, Dad? Henry asked. Henry, have you and Alicia arrived in Garthram? Donald asked. We're on the way. We'll be arriving soon, Henry lied. Why haven't you arrived yet? South Lake City's about to be invaded, Donald said frantically. Don't worry, Dad. We'll arrive in Garthram safely, Henry assured. All right, let me know when you get there, Donald instructed. I will, Dad. I'm hanging up now, Henry said before quickly terminating the call. He was afraid he might let something slip if he said too much. However, Donald didn't suspect a thing. He relayed Henry's response to Marilyn as well. Marilyn stopped worrying once she heard that Henry and Alicia were heading to Garthram. Back at West Eredlands, the Diatoranian soldiers were busy digging trenches. Lord Caspian, Ernest and his troops are only about 20 miles away from us, a deputy general reported. All right. Champion Santos, deploy 2 units to lie in wait on both sides of the borders. Once Ernest and his troops arrive, we'll besiege them immediately, Caspian instructed. I'm on it, sir. Dax carried out Caspian's instructions to the letter, and as soon as the soldiers got into their positions, Ernest and his army of 200,000 soldiers arrived. Chapter 565 Prepared for Battle. Soldiers, the enemy is almost upon us. Prepare yourselves for battle, Caspian instructed the moment he learned that Ernest and his troops were about to arrive. The soldiers from West Eredlands had already gotten ready for the clash, and were now waiting to take the enemy head-on. When Ernest and the Filrenian soldiers saw how few in number the Diatoranian army was, they assumed Caspian had lost many of his soldiers during the fight against Cassius. Thus, Ernest thought this was his chance to reclaim the base from the Diatoranians' clutches. Charge! Capture Caspian! Ernest bellowed his order, and the Filrenian army rushed forward. However, as soon as the soldiers reached the border of Diatoran, they stepped on the landmines Macy had buried. Caspian had instructed her to do so precisely as a means of dealing with the Filrenian reinforcements. Howls of agony filled the air as the mines exploded. Ernest didn't expect Caspian to set up any form of defensive measures beforehand. When Caspian heard the Filrenians' cries, he swiftly commanded, "Get them!" The Diatoranian army swiftly fired away, and the soldiers who had been lying in wait rushed forward as well. Ernest was terror-stricken. He and his army were now surrounded despite having just arrived. The fact that the Filrenian army was being attacked from 3 directions left Ernest feeling flustered. "Launch the counterattack," Ernest ordered. However, the Diatoranians had seized the chance to unleash a ferocious assault on the enemy. "Sir, Caspian was prepared for us. We're at a disadvantage. Maybe we should retreat," one of the deputy generals suggested to Ernest. "We can't retreat. Caspian and his troops are exhausted right now. This is our best shot. We must capture Caspian today." "But the place is covered in landmines. How are we supposed to get to them?" the deputy general asked. "We have 200,000 soldiers. So what's there to fear? Charge over there and take Caspian down," Ernest commanded. Since Ernest was adamant, the deputy general didn't think it was his place to say otherwise. "Give the soldiers my order. Tell them to charge forward. No one's allowed to retreat. We must take back the base," Ernest declared. He wasn't going to back down. Thus, his subordinate had to obey his command. The Filrenian army began barreling forward, hoping to charge through the Diatoranian soldiers' defense line. With each step they took, landmines detonated and pulverized them. Many began to hang back, too afraid to continue making their way forward. They didn't know how many landmines had been buried. "Charge! I'll kill anyone who retreats!" Ernest bellowed in fury. He immediately shot down the soldiers who had begun backing away, and the rest were too frightened to do anything but charge forward. Soon, the Filrenian army was down by 50,000 soldiers. Even though Macy had buried over 1,000 landmines, there were too many Filrenian soldiers, and the landmines couldn't take them all out. "The enemy is closing in on us, Lord Caspian. You should leave," Macy said. "That won't be necessary." "How can I leave when the soldiers are out there risking their lives?" Caspian replied. "Your fate will determine the fate of the battle here, and even in all of Diatoran, Lord Caspian. Your safety is of the utmost priority. You must be protected at all times," Macy exclaimed. "Ernest and his soldiers are doing whatever it takes to come at us right now, so we can't back away," Caspian declared. "What if you get shot? I won't be able to bear the consequences if that happens," Macy said worriedly. "Relax. I won't get shot so easily," Caspian assured. Caspian was too determined. Macy knew she couldn't change his mind, so she commanded the armored battalion to stay by his side at all times. They would serve as human shields to prevent him from getting hurt. Since Caspian was personally supervising the battlefield, Dax knew he couldn't back away either. This was a crucial moment in battle, and as leaders of the troops, what they did would affect the troops' morale, too. When the Diatoranian soldiers saw Caspian and Dax staying on the front lines to supervise the battle, they felt emboldened as well. Thanks to the landmines and the soldiers who had lay in wait to ambush the Filrenian reinforcements, the Filrenians suffered heavy casualties. "Sir, the Diatoranians were well prepared to deal with us. If we continue to charge senselessly, we will all end up dead," a deputy general said to Ernest in an attempt to convince him to change his decision. "We can't back down now. Split our soldiers into 3 and start making advances," Ernest commanded. He had no intention of retreating. Following their momentary panic earlier, the Filrenian soldiers finally regained some order and began to engage in the battle with more discipline. All of a sudden, a bullet came flying at Caspian. Macy's expression hardened, and without any hesitation, she threw herself in front of him. The armored soldiers also realized what was happening, but it was too late. They couldn't protect Caspian from the bullet. However, just as the bullet was about to rip through Macy's chest, a dagger appeared in front of her. The bullet struck the dagger with an audible clang. It was Caspian's diatanium dagger that blocked the bullet for Macy. Caspian had noticed the bullet the moment it began whizzing through the air, and naturally, he wasn't going to let Macy risk her life to save him. He had curled one arm around Macy's waist to pull her away while also grabbing the dagger with his other to stop the bullet. With his acute senses and agility, it was easy enough for Caspian to deflect stray bullets. Meanwhile, Macy thought she was going to die a martyr. She never thought Caspian would save her. She was still frozen in shock. "I told you, I won't get shot so easily. Don't forget who I am," Caspian said coolly. Upon hearing him, Macy finally regained her senses. She blushed when she realized he was holding her. At that moment, she got to feel what it was like to be Willow. She wished she could make this moment last forever. However, she still felt shy about being held by Caspian in front of the armored soldiers. "Can you let go of me, Lord Caspian?" Macy asked bashfully. It was only then that Caspian realized he had instinctively held Macy by the waist. The situation just now had been too urgent for him to consider avoiding overly intimate physical contact. "Don't ever try to shield me from a bullet again. You're a young and beautiful woman who hasn't even had a boyfriend yet. Don't you think it'd be a shame if you died so soon?" Caspian solemnly said. "I won't ever regret sacrificing my life for you, Lord Caspian. I'm more worried about your safety," Macy retorted. In reality, she wanted to say she was willing to dedicate her life in service to him, but she felt too embarrassed to say that in public. "My senses are a lot more sharp than yours. Just focus on keeping yourself safe," Caspian said as he turned his eyes back on the battlefield. The Filrenian army had split into three, but that also meant their strength was stretched between the three and thus weakened. "Sir, we're in a dire situation right now. We're all going to die at this point," a deputy general frantically reported to Ernest. Chapter 566, The Foundation for Victory. "Don't panic. The battle is yet to be over. Once our fighter jets arrive, we'll definitely take back the skies. And then, we'll crush Caspian's troops," Ernest said. "Besides, I've also sent a troop to attack West Fortress Gorge. If we can make our way into Diatoran through West Fortress Gorge, we can definitely make Caspian run with his tail between his legs." "You're right. I didn't think that far," the deputy general said with his head lowered. The battle between both sides had already hit a fever pitch. Right then, an intelligence officer ran to Caspian to report to him. "Lord Caspian, we just received a report that Filren has sent out a fleet of jets. They'll soon arrive at the West Eredlands border." Caspian's expression turned stiff. "How many jets?" he asked. "About 200, the intelligence officer replied. "Instruct our Air Force to leave right now," Caspian ordered. "But if our Air Force were to make a retreat, the enemy is sure to open fire on us." The intelligence officer was concerned. "Don't worry. When their jets reach here, we'll attack them from the ground with missiles," Caspian said. "Understood," the intelligence officer nodded. "Additionally, inform our Air Force to open fire on the enemy's rear while they're retreating," Caspian ordered once more. The intelligence officer left to carry out Caspian's orders. Caspian then urgently made a phone call to the king so that he could arrange for the missile troops to immediately start their assault from afar. They would only begin to attack once Filren's fighter jets had entered Diatoranian airspace. Caspian also made arrangements for the West Eredlands missile defense system to be up and ready for the upcoming fight. Victory would soon be decided. Meanwhile, 60,000 Filrenian soldiers had begun attacking West Fortress Gorge. However, the soldiers that had been relocated to the gorge were prepared. "The enemy is here. Be sure to wipe them out," the West Fortress Gorge general called out. The Filrenian forces general was taken aback when he realized that there were still soldiers defending West Fortress Gorge. "Didn't they say there are no more soldiers here? What's going on? Where did these soldiers come from? Why didn't we receive any reports of them?" One of the Filrenian deputy soldiers was confused as well. "Perhaps they were relocated at the last minute," suggested another deputy general. "Now that's a problem. Do we continue to march forward, or do we retreat?" asked the first deputy general. "They don't seem to have a lot of men. We don't have to worry as we have 60,000 soldiers. We'll take the gorge quickly if we commit to a full assault," the Filrenian general said after he surveyed the surroundings. "But they're currently defending the gorge. It'll be difficult for us to break through their defenses. And even if we manage to capture it, we'll be losing a good number of men," said a frowning deputy general. "It'll be advantageous for us if we can capture this gorge. We'll be able to head into the Diatoranian territory through West Fortress Forge and attack Caspian's forces. We'll be able to crush them unawares," the general declared. "Everyone, listen up. It's time for us to break through Diatoran's defenses. Go forth. Capture West Fortress Gorge," the general yelled to his troops. The Filrenian military began their assault on West Fortress Gorge. "Fight back!" the general of the West Fortress Gorge troops ordered as well. And with that, both sides were thrown into battle. It was difficult to attack West Fortress Gorge due to its defenses. The Filrenian army couldn't advance in such a short period of time. Suddenly, over 100 fighter jets arrived at the West Eredlands border. Ernest initially thought that the Filrenian army had sent reinforcements. His morale was boosted by the thought. However, he and his troops soon realized that they belonged to Diatoran. The Filrenian soldiers instantly became demotivated. The Diatoranian jets promptly began to open fire. Missile after missile was launched upon Ernest's troops. They couldn't defend themselves from the onslaught, suffering huge losses. Ernest himself couldn't fully escape from their attack. A few minutes later, another 200 fighter jets came zooming over. Ernest took a look. This time, these were Filrenian jets. He saw hope at the end of the tunnel at last. Our saviors are here, Ernest yelled excitedly. The Filrenian army had lost all morale, but when they saw the arrival of the Filrenian jets, life returned to their eyes. Just when Ernest and his troops had just seen a ray of hope, the Diatoranian jets launched countless missiles. They aimed for the Filrenian jets. At the same time, the launch silo at the West Eredlin's border also shot out several missiles. The missiles blew up the Filrenian fighter jets just as they had entered Diatoranian airspace. Ernest and his men were shocked by the sight. Jet after jet dropped out of the sky, falling onto the Filrenian troops below. The casualty rate climbed as the jets exploded on Ernest's troops. In fact, the jets took out more people than the missiles themselves. Ernest was troubled. Not only did the Filrenian jets contribute nothing, but they also caused huge losses in manpower to his army. In just a short time, the Filrenian Air Force was almost completely wiped out. Out of the 200, only 40 or so fighter jets remained. Not liking their odds, the remaining pilots didn't dare to remain. They immediately attempted to retreat from Diatoran's airspace. Everything had fallen apart in just 10 minutes. Only 40 jets were left, and Ernest had lost over 100,000 men in that time as well. Ernest's hope was instantly extinguished. He felt like he had just fallen back into hell. Forward! Crush the enemy! Caspian ordered when he saw the chaos the Filrenian army was in. This was the best time to decimate them. Instantly, the Diatoranian soldiers surged forward like a wave. The Diatoranian troops waiting to ambush the Filrenian soldiers also came out of hiding and joined them. Ernest had no idea what to do when he saw Diatoran's joined forces. Many Filrenian soldiers had begun to retreat, the troops having fallen into disorder. Flee! Retreat from Diatoran! Ernest didn't dare to continue this battle. But Caspian didn't want to let Ernest escape just like that. Leading his own men, he chased after Ernest. Meanwhile, Ernest's soldiers had no intent to stay. They simply fled without looking back, causing the casualties to pile up even more. Back at West Fortress Gorge, more troops suddenly appeared as both sides were engaged in fierce battle. It was Toby and his men. He had come on Caspian's orders to defend the gorge. "Surround the enemy and decimate them," Toby called out. "Onward, wipe them out." And so, Toby's soldiers entered the fray. The Filrenian army was shocked to the core when they heard the arrival of Toby's troops. Soon, they were surrounded and outnumbered. Chapter 567 passed the order. Caspian then led the Diatoranian soldiers and rushed into Filrenian territory. Corpses littered the ground. With his deputy general protecting him, Ernest made a hasty escape. Less than 50,000 Filrenian soldiers remained when there were 200,000 initially. "Stop! Stop advancing!" Caspian suddenly ordered. Everyone instantly stopped. "Lord Caspian, why aren't we taking advantage of this opportunity? Now is the best time to fully crush them all." Macy couldn't understand. "We can't head any further in. We're currently within Filren's territory. We might run into danger if we head deeper in. After that battle earlier, Filren won't dare to attack West Eredlin's again," Caspian explained. "I'm deeply impressed, Lord Caspian. The battle at West Eredlin's ended after you took the lead," Dax exclaimed. Meanwhile, news of the victory at West Fortress Gorge reached Caspian's ears. "It took the entire night, but West Eredlin's are no longer under attack," Caspian proclaimed. "Filren's assault on West Eredlin's has caused us huge losses. Why don't we lead our troops west and just crush Filren?" Macy asked. "East Eredlin's and South Eredlin's are still embroiled in battle. We can't just engage the enemy as we like. We need to make the enemy retreat first," Caspian said. Filren had suffered a huge blow to their morale, but Diatoran wasn't much better off. "We're still at Filren's border, Lord Caspian. Let's return to Diatoran to continue our discussions," Dax said. "All right! Retreat!" Caspian called out while waving a hand. "Understood!" yelled the soldiers. They then began to make their way back into Diatoranian territory. Once they were back within Diatoran's borders, Caspian and Dax ordered the soldiers to fortify their defenses. With that settled, Caspian and Dax prepared to return to the West Eredlin's war zone to report to the king. Macy and the armored soldiers followed them as well. They were Caspian's most trusted troops, after all. They couldn't just stay behind in West Eredlin's. Upon hearing that Caspian had defeated Filren's armed forces, the king was delighted. He had already ordered his people to prepare a victory banquet at the West Eredlin's war zone. Now, Caspian's attendance was the only thing needed. Meanwhile, Estria could no longer fight back because their maritime troops at East Eredlands had all retreated. Seeing that the odds were not in their favor, they prepared to make their escape. With that, the marine force at East Eredlands had completely driven back Estria. News of the victories at West Eredlands and East Eredlands soon spread across Diatoran. All that remained was the South Eredlands now. Willow and Zoe were overjoyed when they heard that Caspian had defeated his enemies at West Eredlands. Now, all Willow wanted was for Caspian to quickly return. It had only been a few days, but she missed him already. Back at South Lake City, Astronia's and Videsia's ships had started a heavy assault upon the city's coastline. South Lake City's soldiers fought bravely, but they suffered severe casualties. The city was currently in danger as the enemy's ships were nearby. Sylvia and Desmond led their troops to defend the coastline to the death. There were still some citizens who had yet to evacuate. If they gave up now, those citizens would be in danger. The Hudsons and archers were in low spirits when they heard of Diatoran's victories at West Eredlands and East Eredlands. Initially, they thought their side would win with Diatoran being assaulted by 4 nations from all directions. They thought that Diatoran would fall in a few days, and they would become its new masters. They never thought that the tides at West Eredlands would turn the moment Caspian stepped onto the battlefield. And now, he had also emerged victorious in the battle at East Eredlands. The Hudsons and archers now hoped that Videsia and Astronia would quickly break through South Lake City's defenses at the coast. Diatoran has now taken the North, East, and West Eredlands. They're likely to come out on top. Are we still going to back Videsia? Henry asked. Of course we'll be backing Videsia. Diatoran may have captured those areas, but South Lake City is close to falling. The Videsian and Astronian armies will soon be able to advance, Richard replied. But even if they break through South Lake City's defenses, Diatoran will fight back, Henry exclaimed. And what do you know? As long as they can get a foothold in South Lake City, Videsia and Astronia can turn it into their base. From there, they can slowly take over the neighboring sites. Naporia and Easton will then fall. And after that, the other nations can take the opportunity to attack Diatoran. It's only a matter of time until Diatoran is defeated. You have a point. Then, let's maintain support for Videsia, Henry agreed. When Alicia heard Henry's voice, she began knocking hard on the door. Henry, is that you? Help me! Get me out of here! She yelled from inside the room she was kept in. Please, let my sister out, Henry requested when he heard Alicia's yells. Richard was unamused. She'll be fine being locked inside for a little longer. I'll set her free once Astronia and Videsia have taken South Lake City. Henry shut his mouth when he heard Richard's answer. Back at the South Eredlands war zone, an intelligence officer made his report to Benjamin. The enemy's troops are approaching. Sylvia and Desmond have come with their troops to defend the city. Judging from the current situation, South Lake City won't stand for long. It'll be better if we get Sylvia and Desmond to retreat so that we can minimize the number of casualties. That won't do. There are still citizens who haven't evacuated yet. Those citizens will be in danger if we let the enemy breach South Lake City, Benjamin insisted. You're right. But how much longer can we hold out? The intelligence officer asked anxiously. We can think about that once everyone has evacuated, Benjamin stated. But traffic is in a deadlock now. It'll take at least 3 or 4 hours for everyone to leave. The enemy isn't even sparing us a moment to breathe. We won't be able to hold out for that long. Regardless, we need to hold the line. We can't harm the citizens. Once they have all evacuated, we begin our retreat, Benjamin said. Understood. The intelligence officer nodded. Evacuate the citizens with our military planes right this instant. We must get them out of the city as quickly as possible. We'll get Sylvia and Desmond to retreat in 3 hours. However, we're not giving up on South Lake City. No, we'll be engaging in combat with them on land. Got it. I'll pass the order, the intelligence officer responded. Videsia's and Astronia's naval forces were still locked in combat. Both Sylvia and Desmond were giving their all in this fight. General Frost, the enemy is too strong. We should retreat, or we'll suffer heavy losses, said a lowly officer to Sylvia. Chapter 568 No Rest for the Wicked. We absolutely cannot retreat. Champion Hart has given the order, so we must hold out for 3 hours. We have to buy enough time for the citizens to evacuate, Sylvia declared. But the enemy is well prepared. They have too much firepower. I'm afraid we won't be able to last that long, said the officer. We must defend the city even if it costs our lives. We can't let the citizens fall into danger, Sylvia replied. Understood. The South Eredland's forces began to help the citizens of South Lake City evacuate with their military planes. Meanwhile, the intelligence officer from South Eredlands ordered the soldiers to lie in wait. Once the enemy had reached shore, they could ambush them and start their assault. Chief Sanders, the enemy is about to break through. We should leave, an inspector informed Joey, who had been keeping order in South Lake City as well. The citizens have left. We're not soldiers. Fighting against an army is not part of our duties. The officer shot back. Diatoran's safety is linked to ours. As inspectors, we must carry out our duties. We'll march forth once the enemy has reached shore. Upon hearing Joey's answer, the inspector hung his head. He didn't say anything after that. The hospital in the war zone was filled with patients. Beds were now scarce as the number of patients grew. Avon was busy. He had been treating patients for the last 24 hours with no rest. 3 hours later, the citizens of South Lake City had all evacuated. Sylvia and Desmond then ordered their troops to leave the coast. Seeing Sylvia and her men leave, the enemy promptly approached the shore. They marched into South Lake City and began their assault on land. Sylvia and Desmond led their soldiers further into South Lake City. They weren't making a full retreat. Instead, they utilized the city's terrain and engaged the enemy in battle. The Union Army thought that the Diatoranian troops were scared. But then, the Diatoranian soldiers started a counterattack. It caught the enemy off guard. Caspian soon learned of the Union Army's advance into South Lake City. He had yet to return to the West Eredland's war zone when he received the news. Lord Caspian, the situation is grave. The enemy has made their way into South Lake City, Macy said. I never thought the enemy would invade the city just as I drove back their forces in West Eredlands, Caspian said as he gazed into the distance. Diatoran is currently under attack from all directions. I know you have been put under immense pressure to come up with a plan to handle this. But what should we do next? Macy asked. Inform the soldiers to make their way to West Eredlands as quickly as they can. From there, they should fly out from West Eredlands Airport to meet the enemy at South Eredlands, Caspian announced, his expression neutral. There was no point in panicking. He had to be calm to face whatever might come. Got it! The streets of South Lake City were filled with the sound of gunfire as Sylvia and Desmond fought with the enemy. Although they managed to get the upper hand quickly, the Union Army's numbers had grown. Their armored cars had also made their way into the city. Since they were outnumbered, Sylvia could only cut the enemy off by blowing up the streets and buildings. This was the most effective way. However, this tactic only worked the first few times. The Union Army was better prepared for it once they caught wind of her plan. The Videsian and Astronian armies split up. Half of them advanced from the south, and the other half started their march from the east. While most of South Lake City's residents had already left, there were still some who were evacuating. It was then that the Videsian and Astronian soldiers revealed their cruel natures as they set upon the citizens. South Lake City was now a hellscape as the people were slaughtered. The cruelty of these enemy soldiers was terrifying. Caspian and Dax arrived at the West Eredland's war zone at last. The king was already waiting for them there, preparing to welcome them. You and the other champions have been instrumental in the victory at West Eredland's, Lord Caspian. I initially wished to host a banquet to celebrate this victory. But Videsia and Astronia have invaded South Lake City. They're currently slaughtering the citizens and razing the city. I condemn their actions, but I am powerless to stop them, the king said through gritted teeth. The enemy is heartless. Your Majesty, save the banquet for another time. I shall go to South Eredlands right this instant and drive those beasts back, Caspian declared angrily. But you have only just returned from West Eredlands. Are you not going to rest first? The king asked. Now is not the time for me to rest. South Lake City is currently being ravaged. I must crush the enemy down, Caspian declared. I see. You've had a hard time, Lord Caspian. You've been in battle for the past few days without rest, the king said in sympathy. As a champion, it is my duty to protect this country. Your Majesty, the situation with the West Eredlands is now over. But with Videsia and Astronia's invasion, I too wish to go with Lord Caspian to South Eredlands, Dax said. The king didn't answer Dax as he looked at Caspian. Will you let him, Lord Caspian? I think it will be better for all the champions to stay in West Eredlands. We only obtained victory recently. What if the enemy makes a return? Caspian pointed out. But South Lake City's situation is dire. With the Videsian and Astronian troops there, I still want to go with you. We can discuss West Eredlands again once the enemy has been driven back, Dax said. South Eredlands has champion heart. If I go there as well, we're certain to send If Filren were to find out that you have left West Eredlands, they'll be sure to strike back. So, it'll be better if you stay and guard West Eredlands instead. Caspian pointed out. I understand your desire to defend the nation, but someone must watch West Eredlands. You should stay, the king said. Understood. Dax didn't dare to disobey the king. Lord Caspian, when will you return to South Eredlands? The king asked. Right now. All right. Once you've driven back the forces currently occupying South Eredlands, I'll be sure to celebrate your victory. Many thanks, Your Majesty. Time is of the essence. I need to leave now. May you stay safe, Your Majesty, Caspian said. You too, Lord Caspian. I await news of your safe return. Caspian immediately headed to West Eredlands Airport. He and Macy took the same plane out to South Eredlands. A troop of armored soldiers also followed them to their destination. Chapter 569, The Hudsons Welcome the Enemy Troops. A heated battle erupted between the Diatoranian troops and the enemy troops in South Lake City. The enemy troops were prepared and armed to the teeth. The Diatoranian troops were having a difficult time countering them. South Lake City was now filled with enemy troops from Astronia and Vedesia. The Hudson and Archer families were both in the southern part of South Lake City when they heard the news that the Vedesian troops were heading over. Both Grant and Lawrence came over to welcome them. Both families had been in contact with Kenzie, which the Vedesian authorities already knew. That was why they didn't give either family any trouble. Both Robert Valles, the general of Vedesia, as well as Victor O'Brien, the general of Astronia, had arrived in South Lake City. Robert, who had just arrived at South Lake City, had no place to stay in, so he decided to stay in the Hudson Villa temporarily. The Hudsons were, of course, extremely happy to hear that. They were extremely honored, and they welcomed Robert's presence eagerly. Robert entered the Hudson Villa under the protection of his troops. The Hudsons had not dared to dream about the presence of such a war hero in their home. It was very rare that they could meet such an important figure. They prepared a banquet for Robert. You're quite nice. Vedesia will remember what you did for me, Robert said in broken Diatoranian. You're the renowned champion of Vedesia. It's our honor to host you, Grant said with a hearty laugh. All of a sudden, Alicia was screaming again. Lemieux! Lemieux! She had taken a break out of exhaustion. Upon hearing the noises outside, she started screaming again. Who's that? I hear the voice of a pretty lady. Robert heard Alicia's voice as well. She's my granddaughter-in-law, Mr. Valles, Grant said. Your family, aren't you? Why did you lock her up in a room? Robert asked. Everyone in our family agreed to defect to Vedesia except for her. So we could only lock her up for now, Grant said candidly. Really? How ungrateful, isn't she? Who is she? Why would she refuse to seek refuge in Vedesia? Robert asked. She's Alicia Stewart, the second daughter of the Stewarts. We've racked our brains on how to deal with her, she's so stubborn, Grant explained hurriedly. Who would have known she would have such a flawed personality despite being one of the Stewart daughters? I wouldn't have married her if I had known this would happen. I'm regretting it so much now. I'll divorce her in a couple of days. Richard quickly explained that he and Alicia weren't that close. Henry was annoyed to hear that. What did the Hudsons mean by that? They were pushing the blame onto the Stewart family. The second daughter of the Stewart family? She's from the same family as Caspian's wife, Willow, isn't she? Robert asked. Yes, she's Willow's cousin, Richard said. They all say that Caspian's wife is a beautiful woman. Her cousin would probably be comparable to her, wouldn't she? Robert asked, harboring nefarious thoughts. General Robert, it's true that Willow is gorgeous, but Alicia can't hold a flame to her at all, Grant said. Really? Bring her here, and let me look at her. Robert was tipsy now after a few drinks. She's not beautiful at all. General Valles. It'll be a pity if she ruins your mood, Richard added quickly. What? Are you going against my orders? Drag her out of that room now. I want to take a look at her, Robert snapped, displeased. The Hudsons shared bemused looks. They couldn't figure out why Robert insisted on seeing Alicia. Why are you still standing there? Bring Alicia here now. Grant quickly ordered his servants to bring Alicia over for fear they would offend Robert. The staff carried the task out. Alicia was dragged to the hall, where she saw a group of burly, drunk Vedesian soldiers. Alicia saw a man with a big beard sitting at the head of the table. He was clad in camo from head to toe and had 5 stars on his shoulder, signifying his position. That surprised Alicia. It was obvious that he was quite a powerful figure. She suddenly had a realization. The enemy troops had entered South Lake City. Why did you invite someone from Vidisia into our home? Alicia asked angrily. Shut up! General Valles is our esteemed guest, Grant barked. Vidisia is our enemy. You dare commit treason? Alicia roared. She had been locked up in her room, so she had no idea what had happened. What are you blathering on about? We abandoned the losing side and joined the winning side. Lock her up inside the room so that she stops running her mouth, Grant said furiously. Just as the staff were about to do so, Robert reached out and said, Wait. The Hudsons were all stunned. Robert looked Alicia up and down lecherously, saying, You exaggerated just now. Alicia's looks are exquisite, too. That's considered exquisite. Richard was speechless. Robert had no idea what a beautiful woman looked like. It seemed, Alicia was surely not one of them. Robert would probably lose his mind if he were to see Willow. I think she's pretty, Robert said meaningfully. If you think she's pretty, then she is, Richard agreed. Why would you want to divorce such a pretty lady, Richard? Robert asked. Our stances on this matter are different. Of course I should divorce her. We support Vidisia, while she supports Diatoran. We don't walk on the same path, Richard said. Alicia didn't expect Richard to say something like this, at all. Robert's next words shocked everyone. If you don't like her, Richard, give her to me. It's about time to quench my thirst, anyway, Robert said with a smile. The Hudsons were stunned, as was Alicia. She didn't expect this foreigner to have these thoughts about her. Do you really want a woman as ordinary as her, sir? Richard asked in surprise. She doesn't really have an exceptional figure or a beautiful face, but she has a unique identity. She's Caspian Lynch's cousin-in-law. I want to have some fun with her, Robert said. Why would you want to do that, sir? Richard asked in confusion. If I can humiliate Alicia, it's the same as slapping Caspian on the face. Despite being the Diatoranian God of War, his cousin-in-law would end up being ruined by me anyway. That would bring him shame, too. Robert guffawed loudly. Humiliating Alicia was equivalent to provoking Caspian. That was what Robert thought. The fantasy of making Caspian's cousin-in-law moan under him alone was enough to excite him. Chapter 570. Not even a smidge of dignity. Everyone had a realization upon hearing Robert's words. He set his sights on Alicia because of her familial ties with Caspian. You're shameless and vulgar. Who the hell are you, anyway? Alicia asked. So humiliated she grew furious. I fear that you'd be shocked to learn my identity, Robert said. My cousin-in-law is Caspian Lynch, the head of the 5 war gods of Diatorian. You can't be more powerful than him, can you? I don't believe it, Alicia stated, mentioning Caspian. I'll tell you. I'm Robert, the famous champion of Vidisia. I'm at the same rank as your cousin-in-law, Robert boasted. Alicia was stunned. She didn't expect this guy to be Champion Valles. That was why he also had 5 stars on his shoulder. Alicia had not met Robert before, but she knew of him. He was Caspian's sworn enemy, too. Are you scared, Alicia? You should be happy that I've set my eyes on you. Many other women want me, but I've never given them the chance, Robert said with a chuckle. Alicia, you should thank General Valles now, Richard said. Richard Hudson, I'm your wife. Are you really giving me to someone else? Alicia snapped. So what if you're my wife? Mr. Valles is interested in you, and you should be happy. The family's happy, too. We're doing this for your sake. Richard could care less as he wanted to suck up to Robert. Richard Hudson, you useless lump. You call yourself a man? Alicia roared. You should know about that, shouldn't you? Despite being married for so long, we haven't had sex often. That's because I'm infertile. You can call me whatever names you want. I don't care. Richard didn't even care about his reputation now as he was set on appeasing Robert. Everyone was stunned by his words. Not even the Hudsons knew of his impotence. So that was why Richard and Alicia had never managed to conceive any children despite being married for so long. Richard had indulged in his pleasures without regard for his body in his younger years, which caused his infertility. Alicia knew of Richard's predicament, but she didn't expect Richard to say it out loud. She used to believe that she had to be loyal after marrying Richard, and she was fine with having no children their whole life. However, Richard would give her to someone else just to appease him. Mr. Valles, my wife is basically a virgin. I've only done it with her twice, so you can enjoy her body as you want. Richard laughed. You're loyal, Richard. I'll take her. Then, Vidisia will surely make the Hudsons a powerful family in South Lake City, Robert said jovially. Thank you, General Valles, Richard said excitedly. You can't do that, Richard. You'll be ridiculed further if you do this. At this moment, Henry walked out. Everyone looked at Henry upon hearing his words. He had been standing at the corner, so Alicia had not realized that he was there before hearing his voice. "Why are you here, Henry?" Alicia asked in shock. Well, Henry didn't know how to justify his presence here. "You still don't know about that, do you, Alicia? You disagreed with our choice to defect to Videsia. But your little brother Henry has had the same opinion as I long ago, which is to defect," Richard said, telling Alicia about Henry's stance. Alicia was shocked to the point of no return. "I was forced to, Alicia." "It's all because of Caspian Lynch," Henry said. "Caspian? What did he do to you?" Alicia asked. "Ever since he married Willow, he's been lording over us. I don't want to live under his shadow, and I want the stewards to become more powerful so that we can humiliate Caspian. That's why I could only defect to Videsia," Henry said. "You're dumb as rocks, Henry. Caspian's a 5-star general, the head of the 5 war gods of Diatoran. How can we ever win against him?" Alicia said. "Who says we can't, Alicia? Diatoran will collapse soon anyway. Caspian will be arrested when that time comes. Defecting to Videsia is the smartest choice," Henry said. "You're an idiot. What's between Caspian and us is just a slight conflict, but by defecting, you've made it a matter between countries. We should unite and fight the enemy instead. What if Diatoran achieves victory at last? You'll become a traitor, won't you?" Alicia said, troubled. Henry was indeed an idiot. The united troops of Astronia and Videsia are confident that they'll be victorious. They've already entered South Lake City. "Diatoran will eventually fall," Henry said. "You're ignorant. Not only is Diatoran a country with vast land and abundant resources, but it is also home to many talented and capable individuals. We will achieve victory eventually. If you betray your country now, you'll be considered a traitor after the war ends, and you'll be met with nothing but death," Alicia screamed. "Cut the crap, you two. Diatoran will surely fall. Alicia, serve General Valles well," Richard said. "Richard, you traitor. Why did I marry a person as evil as you? I must have been blind," Alicia cursed Richard emphatically. Henry chimed in as well. "She's your wife, after all. How could you give my sister to someone else? I have no objection to defecting, but you can't just let a stranger abuse my sister." Henry had agreed to defect to Videsia, but he was also close to Alicia and didn't want to see her be abused by Robert. "I have no choice now. Robert happened to be interested in her," Richard said. Henry knew that Richard dared not say no to Robert, so he came up to Robert and begged him, "General Valles, please spare my sister, if only for my sake. I'm willing to do anything for you if you spare her." No. You're the one who wants to defect to Videsia. You should show me your sincerity. If you're willing to give Alicia to me, I'll believe that you're really sincere when you say you want to defect. I'll doubt your sincerity otherwise, and you won't want to know what I do to insincere people," Robert countered. "I'm really sincere. Please, General Valles, please, spare her. I'll do anything you want me to do," Henry begged. "Who the fuck do you think you are? I don't even care about you. I must lay my hands on your sister today," Robert said viciously.